Hello and welcome to this episode of Sports Weekly India. I'm your host Aditya Kuber and I'm joined as usual by RK and Ayaz Memon. As always, it's been an eventful week and weekend of sporting action. We'll be going deep into all of that, from India's win over South Africa to England winning in Pakistan, and of course, we'll have the football and F1 roundup with Soumil Arora. A quick reminder to all our listeners to subscribe to the show on BingePods, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, JioSaavn, Amazon Prime Music, or wherever you get your podcasts. It's free everywhere. We start this episode with some unfortunate news coming out from Indonesia. It's always sad when sports is overshadowed by off-field activities. The unfortunate death of 125 people has definitely come as a shock to all football fans, and especially in a World Cup year. But this isn't really the first such incident in Indonesia or around the world for that matter. RK, violence, sports, policing, it's always had its set of problems. How do you see this Indonesia problem?
Unfortunate, yes, but as you rightly said, it's been a part of not just Indonesia, but it's been a factor in quite a few nations. And I think when you look at such tragedies, you're looking at it from 2 or 3 perspectives. One is from the fans' perspective. Sometimes they do go overboard. The rivalry does go overboard. That's point number one. Secondly, from the policing standpoint, was tear gas necessary? Was it within the rules to fire tear gas at a set of supporters? And thirdly, in terms of ticketing and stadium infrastructure. These are the 3 aspects around which I think I would want to look at this issue. Look, everybody for their part are going to justify themselves. For example, the police have gone ahead and said, we had to use tear gas because a couple of our men were killed in everything that ensued around that particular game. So we were justified in using what we did. The fans are going to say that, look, it is all about celebration or it is all about revenge or whatever it is. So it's been a case not just with Indonesia, not just when a side loses, but also in situations where teams have won. My mind goes back to the final day of the Premier League last season when Everton ensured that they were in the top flight. That was a game against Crystal Palace. Now, the minute the game got over, luckily there were no casualties. But the reason why I'm bringing this point up is because the minute the game got over, the Evertonians were so euphoric about everything that transpired. They did all right against Crystal Palace that they all stormed the ground. Patrick Vieira, who was the coach or the manager of Crystal Palace, had to go from one end to the other, and you actually had fans banging into him. Now, he was unhurt. Definitely, it could be called an accident, but he was unhurt. But when you looked at those scenes, I think even some of the members in the Premier League raised the question about policing there. How is it that you're allowing that to happen in the first place for the fans to get down, even if it be celebration? It's a serious safety issue. The Champions League, I think very recently we saw there was a ticketing issue in Paris. There was a huge investigation that went around. So it is an unfortunate incident, but we are seeing too many of these, whether it is in terms of a defeat or it is when fans go overboard with respect to celebrations as well.
Well, closer home, we actually just saw this in the ticketing aspect in Hyderabad for India-Australia game, It's not something that's unknown, and you can't always actually even blame the police. It's just about fans showing a little bit of responsibility and respect and just being, generally careful. Ayaz, as fans, how do we react to an incident like this? It's really sad. Everyone's there to have a good time. And at what point does it become important for fans to draw the line? At the end, it's just a game. Yes, the home team lost here. So what? Does it really warrant pitch invasion and attacking players? And there are reports that players from both sides were attacked with projectiles and water bottles, and that prompted police action.
Well, I mean, Aditya, it shows you the environment, how steep it was in potential problem. I mean, yes, hostilities do exist in sport. It would be naive to believe that emotions don't run high, especially when there is a favorite team which is playing and there's a home crowd which is come in massive numbers. How to discipline crowds, how to educate them, how to mentor them is one of the great challenges of sport, and especially of mass sports like football, increasingly cricket, as we've seen in our part of the world. It's not so much in, say, golf, not even in tennis. You could say that it's a huge problem where the numbers involved become big. If instead of 38,000, you've got 42 or 44,000 people coming in, there is always the potential there is a risk of some problems or something spinning out of control, which is what seems to have happened here. I think basically it's a management issue. I mean, I'm just trying to break it down into brass tacks. How do you manage an event successfully without leaving so many gaps open that something could, God forbid, something goes wrong, then it goes terribly wrong. So one of the things, for example, if your capacity is 38,000, then, prudence would demand you sell 37,999 tickets, not even 38,000, but certainly not 42 or 45, because that is asking for trouble in case emotions run high. Then it's about how do you liaise with the cops and, what kind of arrangements do you make? A lot of when such a thing happens, in hindsight, everybody, the blame game emerges. Somebody's blaming the cops, some of the cops are blaming the fans are blaming the stadium management, and so on. I just think that there have been so many instances in the last 50, 60 years that it seems ridiculous that it can't be tackled better. So I'm not saying that we can be incident free, because ultimately we are dealing with human nature and human foibles. But we can certainly expect managements, league owners, team owners, etc., and certainly the fans who enjoy the spectacle, who profit from the spectacle, profit either materially or otherwise in terms of satisfaction, they don't do enough to ensure that there is no tragic underside to it. And that's really the problem.
Well, it all comes down to human greed and the inability to just manage your own emotions. Well, our thoughts and prayers with those 125 victims and their families who have suffered very, very dearly in Indonesia. Moving on to cricket. In its preparation for the World T20, India has yet another feather to its cap. We've just beaten South Africa 2-0. There's still a game left to play. But after the win over Australia, this one seems a little more convincing. Well, what do you think are the major positives out of this series, RK? KL Rahul, Akshar Patel, anyone else?
Surya Kumar Yadav has been perennially a positive for Team India. I think if we are talking about the brand of cricket that Rohit Sharma and his men want to play, the vital cog in that wheel has got to be Surya Kumar Yadav, because I remember distinctly a partnership that he stitched with Virat Kohli even during the Asia Cup, where he was the aggressor. His strike rate was incredible. And I think even a second T20 international against South Africa in Guwahati, yes, you had KL Rahul batting with a great deal of intent, which he was probably lacking in the first game, understandably because of the low target that he was chasing and he was trying to find his form. But again, it was Surya Kumar Yadav who did the job. I think overall this year has been phenomenal for him. If you look at the biggest positive for Indian cricket in T20s, it's got to be Surya Kumar Yadav. He's the fastest to 1,000 runs in T20 internationals in terms of the number of balls that somebody has taken. 573 balls, which means his strike rate is close to 175. That is ridiculous levels of consistency that we are talking about in T20 cricket. Even on nights or days when the others are struggling to put bat to ball, this man comes in and smashes it all over. It's almost as if it's a lesson in geometry. Every angle is pretty much covered on a cricketing field. So yes, in terms of positives, batting overall from the series is a big positive. Even from the last series, they've been consistently scoring good numbers, putting runs on board, and even chasing down big targets. If you want me to narrow it down, I think the biggest plus in the entire year is Surya Kumar Yadav's intent and the way he has gone about his business.
Ayaz, do you think Sky is now the main batting stay and the team is actually batting around him? Or do Virat and Rohit still continue to be the alphas of the batting order?
No, I think we have to look at it in combination, as a combo, the top four. And then, of course, you've got the finishers. You've got Hardik Pandya. You don't have Jadeja, but you've got Dinesh Karthik and Pant if he plays as a batsman, or the other way around if Dinesh Karthik plays as a batsman. So I think Surya Kumar Yadav, and just to reiterate what RK said, he's in a purple patch. He can't put a foot wrong. In fact, he's doing everything so right that bowlers across the world who are preparing for the World Cup will be doing overtime, trying to just check where they can stop him, because the runs seem to come from every corner of the ground, a stroke for every angle which is open to exploit. So that's the great part about Surya Kumar Yadav. And I think it stems from a lot of self-confidence and intrepidity. You take those risks because you are confident, and also you have that range and repertoire of strokes. Otherwise you can be like a square peg in a round hole, not knowing what you're doing. So I think what he's doing is he's obviously practicing a lot. It also has to do with imagination, or what they call, visualization. He's obviously doing a lot of that when he enters the ground or before he enters the ground. But also critical is the form of Rohit Sharma, KL Rahul and Virat Kohli. I mean, just as an example, if in Australia you're 20 for 3 with these three gone, then Surya Kumar Yadav may of course, try and play the way he is doing now, but there'll be a lot more onus on him, and his, risk-taking capacity might have to be necessarily reduced to support the team's cause in that sense. So I think that the batting top order has to really work well.
While the batting seems to have found its mark, we have been chasing down and scoring big totals. But the fact that in the second T20, South Africa came to within 20 odd runs of India's massive 237 points to a problem in the bowling. And I think Harshal Patel remains the weakest link so far.
Yeah, I think Harshal Patel is, not been impressive. Let's put it that way. He was your T20 specialist. So was Bumrah, of course. But Bumrah was a spearhead and an acknowledged match winner. Losing him would be a massive, massive blow. But also equally, if Bhuvaneshwar is vulnerable in the death over, certainly, and if Harshal Patel is also having problems of rhythm or, not getting the length or line right, then India have a serious problem, because who do you go to? You go to then Arshdeep Singh, who's very promising, but he's a rookie. And you can't trust the onus entirely on him to do what others, more seasoned and more senior players are not doing. So right now, as we see, and as we've seen against Australia and against South Africa, actually your main wicket-taking bowler has obviously been Akshar Patel.
Yeah.
These are in Indian conditions. How much can you rely on him in Australia remains to be seen. But you need at least a couple of the pacers to come good, and there is a one slot open still. We don't know whether it'll be Siraj or Shami or whoever else goes, in case if Bumrah doesn't go. So it's a fairly vulnerable situation when the bowling attack is concerned.
And speaking of Bumrah, RK, he's now joined the ranks of the injured. It's still unclear how bad it is or how much longer he'll be out of action. There's about 3 days left for the team to depart. What do you make of that situation?
Well, to be honest, as Rahul Dravid said, realistically, he is not ruled out. We've loved to take his word on it. But I guess when you're talking about a back issue, which he's had in the past, it can range from just being a stress reaction to a stress fracture. Stress reaction, for the benefit of people who are listening in, is essentially the inflammation around the bone, which is due to get affected rather if you keep playing. And the more you bowl with a stress reaction, it can eventually lead you to stress fracture, which is a small crack in the bone. Now, from whatever little that I've heard or read or spoken to with experts, I understand that if it is just a stress reaction, you're still looking at a 4-week period of rest/rehab, because you don't want to injure it further. And if it is stress fracture per se, it is effectively, you're talking about 4 to 6 months of recovery. So in any case, assuming that even if it is a stress reaction, then you're not looking at Jasprit Bumrah till about the 30th of this month. Because the news came out just a while earlier, so which is 1 month from where we are, as in when the news came out around that 30th of the last month, you're effectively looking at him being fit to actually bowl in a game, say about the 30th of October. So which is still 1 month. And that is why, look, while we understand that we cannot jump the gun and say his back is gone, understandably so, because there's no formal communication, official communication, yes. But the back injury, it's a recurring back issue. He's had this issue in September 2019 after the One-Day International World Cup. He missed, or he was out of action for a few months, came back end of Jan or February, if I'm not wrong. So it's been a recurring issue. So even if it is a basic stress reaction, it's going to take a while for him to come back. So that is where I'm beginning to get worried.
Well, so some good, some not so good news for India over the last week. The team leaves for Australia on the 6th of October, just a couple of days literally left as we record this. Let's hope that Bumrah is on that plane and is able to play sooner. Moving on to more T20 action from around the world, England has beaten Pakistan. It was a series they trailed 3-2. And the performances of the last 2 matches have been especially good. And the last match, in fact, was a very big 60-plus run victory for England. Would you consider them among the favourites for the title, RK?
Yeah, you look, England will have to be one of the big guys, actually, in terms of the way they revolutionized the one-day international form to begin with under Brendan McCullum. And, of course, the way they have gone about doing the job in T20 cricket in the recent past. I think it's a huge plus. But also is the depth that England seemingly has in its batting department. I think you have the likes of Phil Salt. You have the likes of Ben Duckett, who did exceptionally well, especially against spin bowling in the middle overs. So these are the guys that have done the job for them. I mean, I don't think he is really in the squad, but he could be the first one to be called in if there is an issue to the batter. And I think going away from your country, doing well in another country just before the World Cup, obviously gives you a tremendous amount of confidence. Would want to see Josh Butler when he comes back because he hasn't played a major part at all in this particular series. Would want to see how he gets along once he gets back. And I think the pitches in Australia should suit the English cricket team. And therefore, you can simply not count the English team out because we are talking about a brand of cricket that India follows. Well, to be fair, I think through their one-day international shift in policy, that was a brand of cricket that England actually started off, that other teams are adapting at this point in time.
Absolutely. Ayaz, is Pakistan missing something? I mean, Babar Azam, a couple of their bowlers seem to be well settled.
Shah Afridi.
One line answer. Is that the only missing link?
No, I think they're missing a batsman in the middle order of consistent run getting quality. Somebody who will deliver runs all the time. They are very top heavy. I mean, Rizwan and Babar Azam are obviously the leading batsmen, and that's how it is. Every team wants those two batsmen or the top order batsmen to click. Shan Masood had a half century in the last match. But between 3, 4, 5, 6, there has been a bit of a problem for them to get into a settled pattern. So Babar and Rizwan, I think, have scotched all speculation whether they will form a pair or not in the World Cup because they've just been so good. Rizwan may be, in fact, better than Babar in terms of number of runs scored. But they are having problems, I think, in 3, 4, 5, 6, maybe even 7. Somebody like an Asif Ali, who's renowned to be a six-hitter, strong finisher. He's all of that, but he's not consistent. So, that's where Pakistan, I think, are going to be facing a problem. And like, I think, to an extent, India had or has still a slightly extended tail. So they need to make sure that the top 6, 7, or up to 8 give enough runs for these bowlers to be effective. I think that's where the issue is. Just to mention about England, the England series was riveting. England versus Pakistan, going 3-all and then a decider. The decider turned out to be tepid because the margin of victory for England was very big. But it was a great series to watch and follow, especially so close to the World Cup. And I take RK's point of view. When you go overseas and win, it just gives you such a shot in the arm. And remember, England were without Josh Butler and Ben Stokes. So this is a team that you will underestimate at your own peril.
Well, let's hope that these teams are all at top form in the next 3 weeks because anyways, watching cricket coming out of Australia is always fun, and when teams really compete hard, it's even more fun. Moving on to other sports, we've got Soumil Arora with a quick wrap of all the football action. RK, I really don't want to rub it in, but I have to bring you in here. What do you make of Erling Haaland and what he did yesterday? And for those of you who can't see RK, he's literally just holding his head right now, looking around. Why am I here?
Hello. Can't hear you.
Yeah, neither can Erik ten Hag.
Look, I mean, you knew it was always going to be a difficult game for Manchester United. I'm sure even the most ardent Manchester United fans would agree to that point of view. But to be fair, I didn't think it'll go down that bad for United to concede 6 goals. You've got to give it to not just Haaland, for the way Foden played, for the way the entire Manchester City team operates. They are playing at a different level. Let's be honest about it. And I think United, for all the euphoria that you had after that loss against Brentford, you had, I think, 4 consecutive wins in the Premier League. Then there was the international break, and they have come back and they've started against Man City. A loss was not completely unexpected. Let me be very, very honest. But the margin of defeat was huge. That probably tells you the distance that United needs to cover to catch up with City. And Haaland is unbelievable in a completely different planet. I know it's early days, but the goals that he has scored, the number of goals, and the way he goes about scoring those goals is just mind-blowing, to be honest. I mean, just well done to Haaland.
Force of nature is what he's being called by a lot of commentators.
It's incredible. Look, I mean, I'm just willing to stick my neck out and say, over the last so many years, we've had Messi and Ronaldo being the Ballon d'Ors. Who knows? It could be, I mean, invariably it's been a striker, a goal scorer that invariably gets those awards. Who knows? In this kind of form, he can very well end up being the next big thing if he's not already. It's just insane stuff. I know the world keeps talking about Mbappe. He's great. He's got the pace. He's got everything. But this man, at the end of the day, he puts the ball at the back of the net with boring regularity.
"12 goals in 8 Premier League appearances." With more such info, here is Soumil Arora.
Thank you so much, folks. And this weekend in the world of football, I suppose we just have to talk about the two main fixtures that absolutely defined the weekend. The two derbies that got everyone in the world hooked onto their nerves and essentially produced results that weren't surprising, but the way in which they happened probably shocked a few people. Firstly, let's talk about the North London derby between Arsenal and Tottenham Hotspur. 3-1 to Arsenal. And yes, this means that now they are maintaining their lead at the top of the Premier League. And this could have been a big chance for Tottenham Hotspur to actually go up and trump Arsenal and maybe get to 20 points, share the lead with Manchester City. But that didn't quite happen because of a multitude of reasons. Firstly, they just didn't look sharp enough in the entire match. Players like Gabriel Martinelli, Granit Xhaka, and for that matter, even Thomas Partey were actually carving apart Tottenham Hotspur's midfield. And whenever Tottenham got the chance, they were barely there with the X factor to get it done. Like we saw Perisic miss a couple of chances. And the one occasion where they were sharp enough, it was Richarlison who got a penalty in the penalty box. And eventually Harry Kane converted to score his 14th goal in 18 North London derbies. That is better than anyone else in history, even Thierry Henry for that matter. So he got that one goal and equalised. But that only came after Thomas Partey scored a screamer of a first goal, a big long-range shot. And then after that, we just saw Spurs crumble in the second half. They made a silly error through Hugo Lloris, through which Gabriel Jesus was able to capitalise at the very, very end. And then Granit Xhaka was involved in a brilliant link-up play with Gabriel Martinelli to see Arsenal go for their third goal. And in the middle of all of this, we saw the biggest moment that essentially represented how frustrated Tottenham Hotspur were throughout this match. We saw Emerson Royal just go up with a terrible tackle on Martinelli, just absolutely unnecessary. It had no outcome really because that particular play could have been blocked off. It was just frustration boiling up. And at the end of the day, it was Arsenal 3, Tottenham Hotspur 1 in a match that they completely had control over all the way through. And that means that, yes, they are atop the Premier League by 1 point over Manchester City, who absolutely ransacked Man United. I have no other way of putting it. Yes, the scoreline was, wait for it, 6-3. Yes, 6-3. But in the first half, it was 4-0, and it could have been so much worse. And you might be asking, well, Soumil, who scored the 6 goals in this case? It was 2 hat-tricks for Man City. Of course, I'm going to let you guess the first player. It's no surprise. It has to be Erling Holland. He got 3 goals. Of course he would. He's just scoring for fun right now. And the second player who got his hat-trick was Phil Foden. And essentially, Foden, Holland, and Kevin De Bruyne were the 3 players that absolutely tore apart Man United's non-existent midfield, really, because they were able to get ahead of all the midfielders and find spaces that nobody else otherwise would. And they were able to confuse the defensive line about their runs, and they were able to drop back in times where the defenders thought that they would go ahead. And that essentially gave them so much of space. And then I just have to talk about Erling Haaland for a second, because the second goal that he scored, the long-range pass that he got from Kevin De Bruyne, and the way he extended his body and to tap the ball away from his left foot to just push it into the goal, that is the kind of stuff that every striker wishes to do. And they just tore Man United apart. And the scoreline might say that United had 3 goals, a brilliant one from Anthony, by the way, in the second half. But there's nothing about it. Those 3 goals happened when Manchester City switched off from the game, when they knew that there was nothing quite in it to defend. So they let United have a couple of goals at the end, with Anthony Martial scoring on his return, by the way, scoring 2 goals. Firstly, a header, and then a late penalty that was just there for the sake of it, really. Nothing really happened. And so City tore United apart once again. Haaland scoring goals for fun. He's got 14 goals already, and Manchester City have barely only played 8 matches, so let that sink in. But they're second in the table, 1 point behind Arsenal. Spurs are third with 17 points. They are 3 behind City and 4 behind Arsenal. Brighton still remain fourth with 14 points. And Chelsea are fifth, United sixth, Newcastle seventh, Fulham 8th, and after a dismal weekend once again where they were held out 3-3 by Brighton, Liverpool are down with only 10 points. Well, let's wait and see how this plays out in the Premier League.
Well, thanks, Soumil. And what do you have to give us from the world of Formula One? That was quite another race in Singapore. Wet, not wet, slippery, not slippery. Alonso just lost power in the middle of it. How's the F1 season shaping up?
The Singapore GP was just confusing, really. I mean, the record books might tell you that Max Verstappen started 8th, finished 7th. Nothing really happened over there. Charles Leclerc started first, my apologies, finished second. Yeah, all right, might have lost a position or two. But if you actually look at the race, this was probably the most chaotic Formula One race of the entire season, but not entertaining in a way, because the momentum was always held up by something or the other. Firstly, we got a 1 hour blockage at the start. We got a delay because of the rain coming in. Then we saw so many safety cars, so many virtual safety cars. I mean, let me tell you how many people retired from this one. We had a total of 6 cars not finish the race, and then 2 cars finish a couple of laps behind. It is incredible how stop-start this race was and how little actually happened in the entire 2 hours that we actually got to race. And the race was actually got shot by the time rather than by the checkered flag. So really we had won this one. But at the end of the day, Sergio Perez, in spite of a post-race penalty, held on to win against Charles Leclerc in a spirited drive where he just took the race lead from the very first lap in wet conditions and never, ever let it go. He was incredible, extremely smooth. But you might be wondering, why is it Perez up in P1 and not Max Verstappen? Well, what happened was that in qualifying, Verstappen actually had too little fuel to complete his qualifying lap, which meant that he actually ended up finishing only in P8. They need a liter of fuel to actually give a fuel sample, and Verstappen didn't have enough, so he had to abort his qualifying lap to maintain that 1 liter buffer. And so he started 8th and had just the most terrible race. He made a couple of errors here and there, a few issues with strategies too, never really got the momentum going, fell back down way back and then came back up at the end to pass a couple of drivers. It was just really stop-start for him. And even Lewis Hamilton, who could have been third, but made a rare error to actually capitulate from there to go down to finish P9. So in the driver standings, Max Verstappen still will end up winning the race and the World Championship in Japan. Actually, did I say end up winning the race? It's still pretty likely. I mean, considering the kind of run of form he's in and the kind of pace that he's got, I think he still might end up winning that race. But no spoilers. Let's actually wait and see. But the championship may be sealed in Singapore, in Japan very well, because now the points buffer, it's not better than last weekend, but the probabilities are still very much in favor of Max to finish it off at Honda's home race in Japan. What a moment that'll be for them after a couple of great years in Formula One, after all that baggage and the pressure that they had previously. So heading into Japan, the championship standing still very much in Verstappen's favor, but Sergio Perez is doing a great job to his challenge for P2 in the Drivers' World Championship.
Thank you so much for that, Soumil. And with that, it's a wrap here on this episode of Sports Weekly India. We'll be back next week with all of the action from the India versus South Africa series and a few more sporting activities happening around the world. Until then, goodbye.
Take care.
Thank you. Cheers.